This conference will now be recorded.
It's an airborne transmission, and if you sneeze, it can go as far as, and they've tested this, approximately 27 feet. So even the 2 meters of social distancing may not be enough without a mask. And the mask is there to protect others, and so we want to make sure that is taking place and that we become leaders in that. Now, I totally get it. Conflicting info. At the beginning of this COVID-19, and I'm sure it was due to the fact that there wasn't enough PPE for the frontline workers, we were told that masks were not needed. And so that put a mindset into our society that, okay, we don't need it. Great. But all the pictures that you've seen of anyone dealing with COVID-19, whether EMTs, firefighters, fire persons, police, medical staff, they are fully clothed from head to toe in protective PPE. So there's a conflicting message being sent here. We were just talking to a health science student who stated that her friend, who's going to go back as a dental hygienist, is going to wear complete respirators, gowns, shields, and won't be allowed to take it off during the whole shift. So you can see that we've received conflicting messages. And now that's caused confusion. Whenever major leaders are holding press conferences, including with groups, right, there is an inconsistency of who is wearing masks. And so when we got news through the news media that in the United States that the White House had COVID-19 in its facility, all staff were immediately ordered to wear masks. So again, yet the main persons, even in group dynamics, is not wearing masks. So that is part of the confusion and lack of leadership. My office manager, whose husband is a home care worker, and it's a private company, just 2 weeks ago, we're given the mandate that everyone was to wear masks all the time. It used to be that when they came close to people that they would have to be PPE, but now it's complete picture. So I think we're in a process of transition. As Lauren said so ably, we're concerned about the second wave. And so if we can get these things into place, we have an opportunity to flatten the curve, minimize the catastrophic results of people getting infected. So a picture is worth 1,000 words with leadership, correct? So we should walk the talk. If it is important, then all of us should wear at all levels, government, national, provincial, local, business, and our own personal opportunities as well. And so in our society, we have not made that change yet. It's not our new normal. And so we want to make sure that we get the information out so that that new normal can start taking place. And so the wearing of masks. Now I believe Lauren will be able to give you the links. We did some homework, both on the government of Alberta has now a publication on wearing masks and homemade masks and such, the guidance of wearing non-medical face masks. We've also sent having a URL available, all you need to know or all you want to know about wearing masks and what types of material could you use. And both of these 3 publications all work hand in hand, and they are very consistent in their information. Highly recommend you have a look at it. So the wearing of masks, it needs to fit, right? Of course, it needs to be sterile, both your face and the mask itself. You need to be able to breathe. There's been situations where people have worn masks and they can't breathe. And so that is totally counterproductive. It should be as comfortable as possible because it needs to be worn for the time that you need to. And if you've seen some of the pictures on the media where some of these doctors come take their masks off, they've got bruising and everything else because of the tight fit. So a fit is very, very crucial. So depending on the risk factor is what type of mask you're going to need. The dental offices, doctors, they're wearing respirators and face shields because that is the level of risk. Now, one thing we also need to understand that when we are doing any kind of first aid, we should have similar opportunities for the people that are providing your workers first aid. We've got to protect themselves. So we want to make sure that that's available for our first aiders. Usually an N95 mask is worn on the job site, and cloth masks can be very useful in a personal setting and on a day-to-day basis where an N95 is not needed. Now, demand, although production has been increased and we are seeing more of it, we're still hearing of shortages. And so that is difficult when we're saying, please wear a mask, and they're not available. Of course, cloth masks, right? Single use, they need to be washed. And please, folks, make sure that your hands have been washed for 20 seconds prior to. If you're putting gloves in, make sure that you've got sterile gloves as you put it on. And then please don't touch your face while wearing your mask. And I know that's difficult because sometimes you get itchy, you might need to sneeze. You need to keep those masks on. And then you should have a proper decontamination system at home that you can isolate that mask after you take it off, put it somewhere either in a containment or get it washed right away, and then make sure you disinfect all of your steps, doorknobs, you might even surfaces, the vehicles and such. So we want to make sure that we look after that, okay? One of the things we're looking at is to get competent, washable, and wearable masks, and maybe put our company logo on it on the side in a very, short way or very minimal exposure, but to start giving it some identity. There's lots of good masks out there, lots of good cloths. There's companies, just make sure that it meets the criteria as per the link that we're providing for you. And so that has good stuff. Now, the stigma. We need to look at what's causing some of this process. One of my colleagues wrote this and said, well, why don't I wear a mask? Well, it's my body, it's my choice. No one can tell me what I should wear. It's not an N95. Why bother? Well, the cloth mask can assist in preventing transmission of your droplets to others. It looks dumb, doesn't look good. My beautiful face, nobody can see it. All they can see is the whites of the eyes. Our leaders don't wear it. Why should I? And I am healthy, and I don't want someone else to think I'm sick if I'm wearing a mask. So some of these are realistic. Some of those are just perceptions, and we want to make sure that we start changing that dialogue. It's got to be the new normal. So we need to use our resources to change this perception. We need leadership and education. So if you're the safety person, or if you're an owner of a company, we need to lead by example. We need to walk the talk. And so we need to create a new normal in society, and we need to make a shift. The more people start wearing these more consistently, all of a sudden we'll reach that fulcrum, and then everyone will start moving. It's the same as when seatbelts, for those of you that may be as mature as I am, when we actually rode in vehicles without seatbelts. And so when we started wearing seatbelts, it took a while to get that into a new processing. Usually it takes 21 to 28 days to actually create a new habit, whether positive or not positive, but that's what it's going to take. So our new normals are social distancing, washing of hands, working from home, virtual meetings, just like what we're doing, education. And so we need to educate. And so we need to set out clear expectations of what we want our life to look like, that whether at home, at work, in society. What masks, we need to educate what masks need to be worn in what situation. And of course, we need to instruct how to wear them properly. And so I just heard on the news this morning and that actually that there is a gender inequality here with wearing masks as well. Believe it or not, the female gender seems to be more on board than the male gender. And I'm making no judgment on that, but that was stated on the news this morning as I was preparing for today. So, and again, I make no judgment with that. And of course, we need to have a system in place at home so we can be consistent at work, so that we don't forget the mask, because forgetting a mask could have some life-changing opportunities, and they're usually negative. So that's the basic stuff. We were not going to go into how to make a mask. I think there is lots of good information on the internet, in social media, of what mask you can create or buy. The government of Alberta wearing non-medical face mask is excellent. It is point by point. It gives you specifics. So I thought we would leave that at that. Now, we need to start talking about mental wellness. It's going to become the next major issue in our society. We want to make sure that there is some form of recognition that people are challenged, people are stressed. In some cases, people have a lot of anxiety. Our organization now starts all of our meetings with, how are you today? How was your week? With the focal point of making sure that if someone, and we've opened the door wide open policy, if you're having a bad day, if something is just really troubling you, please contact us and we'll have a good discussion. Sometimes all it is just a quick discussion. Hey, I'm having a bad day. And so the opportunity to open this up is very, very important. We had a health science student that contacted us, and I'm going to quote this from this student because I think it's very important that we recognize that some of our young people are looking at the world today and saying, where do we go from here? So this is a direct quote from her letter she wrote to us. And the lack of control, combined with a fear of the unknown, especially for someone like me who is a textbook type A control freak perfectionist, is really unnerving and takes up a lot of my subconscious energy. I often find myself just staring blankly at my computer screen and forgetting what task I was supposed to be doing. My motivation is down on all fronts, with school, working out, work, even walking the dog. I am normally super motivated, but because I don't have any answers on the future, it feels like everything I have been working towards is not there anymore and makes all my work feel a bit pointless. Now, that's a microcosm of where some of our young people are feeling. What about the personal emotional reactions, even in myself, as we reorganized our business to go long term? Once that planning stage was over, I personally had emotional letdown on a full day. It was not a pretty sight, and I really had to focus on grounding myself by taking some deep breaths to really focus on the positive in order not to look at that cliff that I was looking at. So I am usually, and some of you may know me personally, a very positive individual. I look at life with glass half full, and so for recognizing that myself I've gone through it, I can just transpose that a lot of other people have going or are going through this. What about working in high-risk environments? Stress, right? Essential workers. What about our businesses that were to open, right? And they were told the day before, prior to opening, you can't open until the 25th or next week or the end of the month. The stress that involves by hiring workers to have logistics in place and then to be able to open. Insolvencies long term, right? The economic outlook. These can all look at stress factors with businesses, economics. What about our home front? A lot of people are working in very high risk process, and then to go into the home environment and protect that. That causes stress not only for the person that is coming into the home, but what about those that are at home and now having to look after that containment? And so that's not easy. So also with isolation, especially you may be the only person in your home, and now the opportunity for human contact because you are at home working from home is limited, and that causes some challenges as well. And of course, health, finances, cooped. What happens if you've got young kids at home and you are now the major teacher besides what's going online? And so daycare, all of that stuff, all of these things have been affected and are part of our new normal. And so I do want to talk about anxiety, depression, and as you can see, I've written PTSD because there's now a real concern in the medical community that all of those frontline workers, having seen the devastation on human life, they're going to have to deal with that from an emotional point of view. And I believe that that is one of the new focal points that our health system and our government is going to look at to make services available for those workers that have post-traumatic stress disorder. But if you've got anxiety, that can be magnified. A major panic attack can feel like you're having a heart attack. And so the whole focus of this conversation today is I think we need to have open conversations that it is not a weakness to say, I am not doing well. It's reality. It's an honest emotion that we as a society need to start embracing and help one another out, because it's going to be or could be incredibly devastating if we don't look after that. So the future, the amount of stress that comes with that, subsidies, all of those things, right? We don't know what economic and health and personal challenges we're going to be facing. And the uncertainty of it does not give us any grounding or comfort, because there's no security in not knowing what is going to happen. So what can we do? What can we do? Now, we've done some research on HuffPost, Mayo Clinic, the government of Alberta, and they all state very similar things. And it states this: the first thing we need to recognize, if you're not having a good mental wellness day, don't hide from it. Acknowledge it and find out where that's coming from, and accept the facts that things are not right and try to do something about it. Could be just a quick phone call to a good friend, to a loved one, to family, whoever you trust with that emotional need at the moment. So we need to start doing some breathing exercises, deep breaths, right? Change your routine, create a new one, maintain it, do some physical exercise. This can all assist. And again, these are just thought-provoking pieces of information. One thing may work for some and another thing for another. Change your routine, correct. Limit COVID-19 bombardment from our media sources. I believe that it is a new criteria that could be very negative. And so it is all talking about what is happening. You may even want to change, or I know we're all working from computers and social media, phones and everything else. You may want to set actual time limits and talk to some human beings. May sit across the lawn with your neighbors or with good friends. Walk outside, social distance, and we need to look at creating a new positive new normal for yourself, for your workforce, for your workspace, and yourself. And then, of course, let's pay it forward. If we've got friends and we haven't talked to them, why don't we contact them and say, hey, how are you doing? And then, of course, if that's not working for you folks, could you please get some help, some professional help? There are so many societies and organizations, the government of Alberta, that have those helplines available, and there's 1-800 numbers. And again, this whole focus is to make sure, because the worst case scenario could be where, and this was a week and a half ago, where I watched on the news where a cruise ship worker who was on one of the cruise ships who were stuck in Florida was able to come home, and he related to the fact that a lot of the workers there that could not go home had lost hope, and 4 of them paid the ultimate price by not being with us anymore. And that is just a absolute catastrophe, and it's just horrific. So is there hope? Absolutely, folks. What we're trying to say is we just need to, when we acknowledge something, when we bring something to the forefront, it is an opportunity for us to deal with it, specifics, and then have some coping tools to go with it. So thank you. I appreciate you letting me have the time. And if you have any questions, please, Lauren, I am going to hand things back to you. Or you can take it back, please. All right, here we go.
Thanks, Ernest. That was
Yes.
awesome. We don't have any questions yet, but actually I have a couple for you. So I was just thinking about my experience on Friday. I went grocery shopping and I wore a mask. And I will be completely honest, it was uncomfortable and it was hot. And I took it off as soon as I could in the parking lot after I was done shopping. So I guess my question is, there are some roles out there in our industry where, people may not need to wear an N95 mask, but they may need to, for the bulk of the day, be wearing some sort of a mask. Given that it is hot and uncomfortable, how do we get around the fact that people may opt to not wear it just because of that? What do we do? Do we give people, I don't know, mask breaks? How do we build that in so that people are being safe, but also, their faces aren't getting irritated and they're not choosing not to because it's so uncomfortable?
Well, the situation is that there's going to need to be some flexibility from organizations and work sites. Anytime there's no social distancing, what concerns me with this, where we have put a sort of a false sense of security with social distancing, as you can appreciate, 2 meters. So what needs to take place, I believe, is that the company or the organization takes the lead, investigates in what cloth mask can be worn that is as comfortable as possible. Yes, there's going to be times it is, and then make sure there's break times available. The challenge is putting on and taking off the mask.
Right.
Because the moment that mask is on you, it now has an opportunity to become compromised with whatever is in the area. So there needs to be some specific protocols on how to either disinfect or sanitize everything if they take that mask off. Because the moment you touch your face and you have been compromised with that COVID-19, then that's an opportunity for the community transmission to take place. So it's going to require some safe work practice, safe job procedures, and some analysis and a space that is decontaminated on a daily basis if that's going to be part of the break room. I recognize that this is a huge shift in where we're going. And so we need to have a complete conversation with all of our workforce in order to make that happen. And so, yeah, there's going to be some trial and error on the longevity wearing, not on the masks themselves or that they need to be worn, but how that is managed during the day.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's a great question in the chat, sort of along those lines, but glasses fogging seems to be a huge challenge. How can we wear the mask and not create more safety hazards?
Yeah.
How do we see?
That's right. We need to see to be able to do our work. I totally get that. So one of the things, that's where your fit is going to come in. So if those glasses are fogging, it's obviously that the air that's being exhaled is escaping to the top, which means that there's not a proper fit on the mask itself. And so when those masks, they need to be fitted properly so that the exhale is at the bottom, not at the top. Because the moment that is at the top, it's going to go into glasses, and yes, that's going to fog them up, and that is a risk as well.
Right. So I guess it comes down to fit. So I guess the challenge is, unless you're being specifically fitted for a mask, your comment earlier where, maybe you could order company masks that, have the logo on them, they're going to fit everybody a little bit differently. So I guess, is it just trial and error then till you find, a half dozen that fit you the right way, and then those are yours and you sort of hold on to them? Or
well, I think we're going to need to look at that as we move further. I totally agree, because N95 masks also have to be fit tested. So I think it would be prudent for companies to organize that they get some samples and then fit test their people and then buy the ones or create the ones that work. So yeah, it's going to take some working through, and it's going to take some time and effort to get the right masks for the right people, because you're absolutely correct. Not every mask fits every person, but that is still a standard that's been around for a long time, right?
For sure.
And of course, it has to be clean shaven in the area where the connection is and everything else. So the same principles will apply as we've already had in our construction industry for the last years. So that hasn't changed.
Cool. Okay. Just flipping over to the mental health aspect just for a second. I guess it's sort of a comment I have and then a question. The comment is some of our larger members or some larger organizations may have employee assistance program as part of their benefits. And I think it might be a great time to remind employees of that. So to send a note to all your employees and just let them know how they can access that. You know, that is everything from online counseling to, you know, in some cases, there's, you know, medical assistance and things like that. I know I've accessed it in the past with previous employers, you know, when I was going through some challenging times. So it's anonymous, you know, you as an employer aren't told who accesses it. So I think it's important that if that is something that's available to employees, that they are reminded of how to use it.
Yeah.
And then along that note, what other ways can employers reach out in a non-invasive way, you know, regarding employee mental health? I mean, we can always say, how was your week? And then, you know, you can get that one word answer, fine, you know, good, whatever.
We all know what fine means, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
So how do we, you know, without being too pushy or naggy, how do we, you know, what are some ways that we can, in a non-invasive way, make sure our employees know?
So a couple of things that I think we should be working on is first of all, what kind of culture have we created for our organization? Is it an open door policy, or is mental wellness still a stigma? We should look at orientations that now becomes part of our health and safety orientation, and a level of importance put into that. Listen, these are our requirements that if you are not doing well, here is the support we're going to give you. And as part of our emergency response planning, that we create a mental wellness response if someone is really having a very difficult day, that our emergency responders also understand, including our supervisors, that this is now an actual health issue. And I think that's so important that it becomes standardized in our organizational process from a safety perspective, that everyone knows that this is just as an injury, if you could say, because WCB is now looking at COVID-19 situations to accept them as work-related incidents, right? The infection and those kind of things. And I know that they're moving towards the mental wellness in more detail, but that it becomes part of our organizational structure. The moment we put importance to it, the less of a stigma that may be, and we need to actually train our supervisors or the people that are directly involved in some of the soft skills, in able to, when they ask the question, how are you doing, that they actually listen and actively listen, which is, you know, full body language, just have some basic information. They're not going to be medical professionals, that's not what about, but they can be observant, and they know their people the best. They know at what level they usually emotionally come to work, and if they see a significant change, that they understand and know whom to call, what to do in order to get those people the help. So it needs to become part of the organizational process, right from beginning right through. And if you have an emergency or those kind of programs, awesome. Not all companies can afford that, but have those links to mental wellness societies, so that we can give that out and give people the tools so that they can take care of themselves.
Yeah, and we have actually listed quite a few of the mental health resources for the Calgary region on our website. So to save you all from Googling, they're there. I guess sort of along those lines, I know if anybody's sort of active on social media or even just in your own social circles, there seems to be kind of a bit of a divide forming between, you know, people who are still diligently following protocols, you know, they're listening to what the government is suggesting, you know, they're, for whatever reason, it could be, you know, they may be immunocompromised, they may have somebody in their family who is, they may just, you know, want to keep their neighbors safe. You know, so there's sort of that camp of people who are being very diligent. And then there's the other side who, you know, as you mentioned earlier, the COVID fatigue, like they're sick of being inside, they're sick of not being able to go golfing, they're sick of all of these sorts of things. And now that things are opening up, they're just kind of throwing caution to the wind. I've seen things online where people believe that the only way that, we'll get past this is if we all get it, sort of let's all expose ourselves to COVID. I'm not going to say that either side is wrong or right, but obviously those divides are starting to happen.
Yes.
And I'm sure they're absolutely happening, in offices, on job sites, all that kind of thing. So how do we bridge that divide? So it's, your workplace stays moving and functional. But B, so again, that mental health is preserved. I mean, we posted an article on Facebook a few weeks ago about what our industry was doing for safety. And the number of people, there was a group of field workers who were very concerned about their job site safety and bringing things home to their kids and all that sort of thing. And then there were people right on the Facebook post, basically calling them babies and wimps and stuff like that. And we're a little braver on social media, but I also have to think that that's happening to a degree out there. So how do we make this? How do we make that balance happen so that we're respectful of other people's ways of, addressing COVID?
So let's look at what's happened in society as a whole, not only Canada, but the world. The countries that made this a priority had a significant reduction of active cases and fatalities. I'm not sure that if you've looked on some of the news media on what's happening in the United States, it's a free-for-all in certain states, and the numbers show it. And so the attitude directly could affect the safety of the worksite. And again, it comes back to what is our culture on our worksite? What's our expectation? What's our education? And what's our accountability? I'm a business owner. I have employees. The last thing I want on my watch is someone not going home permanently because we did not do our job in keeping them safe. That's a responsibility that weighs heavily on our shoulders. That's why we shut down for a month and a half until we got things, because we had a couple of our employees get COVID transmission, not through our work-related process, but because of community transmission of where they were. And so that woke us up. And so our employees are not to go anywhere without being masked up, period. The challenge, what I have seen though, in a home situation, it's so easy to forget. You really have to actively engage. Have I got my PPE on? That's a new habit that needs to be created, because it's so easy to stand 2 meters from someone across the lawn and then drift together, because that's normal human nature.
Yeah.
Right? It is. And so that human contact, and we're craving it because a lot of us have been cooped up. A lot of us had put protocols in place. So we need to, first of all, have self-awareness. The organization needs to have an awareness, and that needs to be translated to our workforce. And we need to hold our people accountable to that standard consistently and not slip ourselves. But again, how do our kids learn from us? How do our kids learn from us? It's not by what we say usually, but it's how we act and what we do, and they copy and emulate us usually. So it all comes back to leadership again. We need to lead by example, and that's one of the reasons, thank you for having me over again, because we want, as BILD Calgary, right, and its membership, to be that leadership so that we can show the society and our workforce, this is important, we need to do this. And the more of us that do that, we're going to then change the culture as a group dynamic. And then the more people get on, sooner or later, it's going to be that fulcrum and shifts over, and then everyone's going to follow suit. Right now, it's a foreign object, so to speak. Does that make sense? And I say that with great respect.
No, it is. I mean, I think we've all been put in a position with this where we're having to make choices that, we've never had to make in our lives. And, managers and leadership within organizations are having to make decisions on things that are not in their wheelhouse. What type of mask should they wear? Like, we're asking a lot of people, and we're all kind of, learning as we go. So I think, there does need to be a cultural shift, but that's challenging because we need to shift pretty quickly. And as you said, like, it takes a while, right? So
the only challenge with this could be a life, and I'm not please hear me clearly, I am not a fearmonger, but I do want to recognize that some of these actions or decisions could have life ramifications.
Absolutely.
And so that I know, and in this case, we need to act quickly because with what you stated at the beginning, Lauren, and I so concur, we have an opportunity to minimize that second wave. And the second wave will come. We'll have a flu season on top of it. It's going to be a double whammy. And so in our last presentation, we showed you the graph that the second wave was especially in the 2000 or 1918 pandemic, the second wave was much, much larger than the first wave. And I think we can take leadership in minimizing that wave for ourselves, our organizations, our families, and our society. And I can't stress that enough, that leadership is a crucial key here, crucial key.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are definitely starting to see some second waves, in North America. My brother lives in Texas, and I don't know if people know, but Texas, I think 3 days ago had 2,000 new cases in one day. And they started opening things up about 2 weeks ago. So I think there's lots of examples to follow and examples to not follow. But there are examples out there of what happens when we're not diligent enough. And
on top of that, I believe in China and Wuhan, they're testing 11 million people again because they've had re-outbreaks as well. Vaccines are not here for minimum 12 to 18 months. There are some remedies now that are slowly coming into the process, but we're not there yet. I hate the word herd immunity because that sounds like but we don't have a societal immunity. And I understand where the thought process, well, let's everybody get sick. Well, if you have a 6.7 or 10% death rate, what does that say, right, with that? And it's, folks, this disease and this virus has no respecter of gender, age, where you come from, who you are. It will seek out the weakest points in your physiology and it will attack it. And they're still finding out new processes with this. So I'm not a medical expert, but this stuff is nasty. And, SARS and Ebola have an R naught of 2, which is one person has the opportunity to infect 2 people. This one has an R naught of 5.7 or almost 6. So one person has the opportunity to infect 6 people. So, and if those 6 people get infected and they infect 6 people, you can see it could just spiral out of control again. So what we're talking about today is one of those basic mitigation opportunities, both from a physical separation of our breath or our droplets, as well as coping with people who are stressed to that level and are having difficulty coping. I think they're going to be both important as we move forward, especially as this is now in month 6. We still don't know what the subsidies are going to look like. We still don't know what business is going to look like. It could take up to 3 to 5 years before we get any sense of normality of business opportunities. There are so many factors that could put people at risk. So first, we need to look after the physical. Second, I believe we need to look after the mental wellness of our people, including our own persons and our families, because they are affected just as well.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important to remember too is we seem to be measuring things in cases and deaths.
Yes.
And obviously deaths are hugely important, but there's this big gray area in the middle where, I know of people who have had what's considered a very mild case of COVID, and they felt like death for 2 weeks. So, if you lose 6 people on your job site for 2 weeks plus, because they are feeling so terrible and they need to be quarantined and all that sort of stuff. There's also people who have lasting, lung capacity issues. In some cases, there's a Calgary man who has partial paralysis in his leg. He's in his 40s. Like it's not just about, fully recovered and death. There's some space in the middle that I think from an economics perspective and then also a people perspective it does have impacts as well.
And again, there is so many factors to this health crisis from COVID. I mean, people's legs have been amputated, COVID toes, kids. There's now a respiratory process that's specific to children and such. So there are so many factors that we don't know yet, including the long-term ramifications of people who've gone through this. And so I totally agree. And so I can't stress enough, we as an organization, we as a group have the opportunity to make change. And change is not easy, and change takes time, effort, and determination and consistency to make it. And sometimes that's not popular.
Nope, for sure. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have for today, and I think that's probably a good note to end on as well. I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and thank you again, Ernest, for being part of our day today. And we will be doing these, we will continue to do these every Tuesday for the next little while at least. And a recording of this meeting, of course, will also be on our website as always, probably later today. So that's it. Everybody have a great day. It is Tuesday. It is not Monday, even though it feels like a Monday. And enjoy your short week.
Stay well, everyone. Cheers.